Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be going through the Texas Senate race. This is one of the biggest races in the 2026 election cycle. This is Patrick Presents Politics, the first of many videos to come, hopefully, on this channel. So today we're going to take a look at the Texas congressional races, specifically the Democrat U.S. Senate race and the Republican U.S. Senate race in Texas as well. So we're going to start off by taking a look at the Texas Senate race for the Democratic Party. And you can see the three candidates here: Ahmad Hassan, James Tallarico, and Jasmine Crockett are the three main candidates running for the Democratic nomination in the Texas Senate race. And no votes obviously in just yet, but we will get those soon as the primaries are coming up and the ballots keep on coming in with the early voting. So the main thing we're going to look at here is how are the markets looking at these races and what is the general polling looking like as well. And then we'll even take a deeper dive into the early voting, look at the numbers there and what that might mean for the Texas Senate race as a whole. So let's start off with the markets. If we take a look here, the markets love James Tallarico to win this. As you can see, Polymarket and Kalshi both have Tallarico at a 78% chance to win the Democratic nominee for Senate. And you can also see that many people would share that same sentiment as James Tallarico claims most of the market volume as well. Now, Jasmine Crockett, though, although being down in the market polling among people placing bets on these elections, the polling would suggest that she actually holds a very slight margin over Tallarico. We've seen over time that this margin has really closed in. So if you go back to late last year here, you can see that Crockett is up around 18 points. And then as we get closer and closer to the new year, Tallarico starts to close in a little bit more on that gap. And then right here, we get this mid-January push from Tallarico where he actually makes it really close, but perhaps just a one-off scenario as Crockett goes right back in the lead. And then more recently, we saw Tallarico, his interview on the Stephen Colbert Show got struck down by the FCC, and that was a big piece of news for Tallarico, as it really allowed him to get more publicity, as many people were against the FCC's decision. And so you can see this recent closing in of the gap. Obviously here you can still see Crockett a wider margin, but then right here we see this really tight gap has formed between the two as the primaries approach and early voting has started. So 0.5% average polling for Jasmine Crockett, who is currently in the lead. And you can also check out here too the change in polling numbers. So Tallarico has obviously seen big gains recently, whether you look at the last month or the last week. But Crockett, although has a 4% gain over the last month, a 1.4% loss in the polls over the last week. So recently, it seems like people have started to move to James Tallarico's side in this election for the Democratic nominee in the Texas Senate race. And if we take a look at early voting, this is something that is going to be super important. We're going to take a look at this number specifically, the early voting number. We see this is 1,317,981. That is the early voting for the Texas Senate race for the Democrats in the primaries. And we can see also in certain counties, we see obviously the biggest counts in places like Bexar County. We can also see Cameron would be in the mix there too, but the main one is Dallas, 185,000 ballots. And then down the list we go Denton, Fort Bend, Texas as well is in the mix. And there are many more as well, but Dallas is probably one of the biggest in terms of contribution of ballots to the early voting for this Texas Senate race. And let's just take a quick look now at the Republican Texas Senate race, because this is also a very interesting one. The polling, though, would suggest a bit of a wider margin than most would think. So the markets see Ken Paxton as a clear winner, 84% on Polymarket and 85% on Kalshi. Once again, no real indication of results, but generally how people see this election, Ken Paxton holds the overall advantage. Now, we can also see here with the markets, if we take a look at the market volume, we do see a very interesting, very close race here between all three candidates. Wesley Hunt has also made his case too in his campaign for the Texas Republican nominee in the Senate race. And John Cornyn also is right near Ken Paxton's 1.5 million in market volume. But now let's take a look at the polling numbers, because that's what we really want to take a look at here. So Ken Paxton leads Cornyn by 3%. Wesley Hunt does take about 17% of the polling percentage. And a lot of people have been wondering, okay, what happens if you take Wesley Hunt's average out of here? What if you take this out? How will it distribute? We've seen polling that shows that Ken Paxton still holds the advantage over Cornyn. As a matter of fact, that gap in the average percentage would actually widen if we were to do that. And you can even see some of the polling coming out here too, showing that Paxton clearly in the lead here in many of the polls, especially when you start to take away some of Hunt's percentage on certain areas. You see that Paxton starts to get a wider margin of victory in those polls. But lastly, we'll take a look at the early voting. So one thing that's very important to note is this early voting number is lower than the Democrats' early voting for the U.S. Senate by about 2 million of early voting ballots. And we can also take a look at the certain areas here, and you do see a very similar distribution as expected. But Dallas, only 63,000 from Dallas. That is a very interesting, interestingly low number there for that county. And Baxter here with 44,000. So the Republican Senate race also heating up as well. And although trailing the Democratic Party in early voting, we still wait to see what the primary day voting will be like for both the Republican and Democratic parties in the race for the Texas U.S. Senate 2026 midterm elections. And also, we will take a look at the Texas governor race. Maybe not a lot of people talking about this one as much as the other ones. But as you can see, Hinojosa in the lead here for the Democrats, according to the market, seems to be the clear primary winner. 98% Kalshi, around 99% in Polymarket. Taking a look at the early voting here, 1.3 million for Texas governor race. Obviously going to be about identical. No, it will be identical to the U.S. Senate race. And we do see that reflected here too with the Republican one as well. So that's just a few of the numbers that you want to be looking out for. I see Greg Abbott, obviously he's already the incumbent governor. He will clearly be going for another 4-year term in the Texas governor position. And so we'll wait to see how both parties clash in the midterm elections for the governor race. But for now, that is about it here on the Patrick Presents Politics, episode 1. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, and comment anything below, any observations, anything you'd like to share, and I will be sure to pay attention to those comments. So thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for more in the future. Peace.